Oh, hey. Welcome to the Living Worship Podcast with Cameron Diamond. My name's not Cameron Diamond, but it doesn't matter. Let's go. In this podcast, Cameron's going to be talking about ministry-related topics and other things.
Oh my gosh.
He's also going to be bringing up his past sermons from the Wednesdays before. And with that, it's time for the podcast. So let's give it to Cameron Diamond for the Living Worship Podcast.
Hardcore, baby.
Hi, welcome to the Living Worship Podcast. I'm Pastor Cameron Diamond. I'm glad that you've made it back. We're in the middle of our study of Exodus. We've been talking about how the Israelites have been in slavery and in bondage for now 430 years in the land of Egypt. God brought them there to save them from famine. They stayed, they multiplied, they were made slaves, and for a long time they lived in horrible conditions. And did God forget about them? No, we know that he didn't. And in Exodus it tells us, and where we left off it tells us, he didn't forget. He heard their prayers. He knew that they had a need. And finally, God is ready to save them. It's the right time to save them. And Moses is the person that he chooses to use to save them from this horrible time in slavery and to bring them back to the promised land where they're supposed to be, where he said that they would live. And so he's reclaiming his people. It's the right time. And so God's timing may not be what we like, but God's timing is always perfect. All right, so we're picking this up in Exodus chapter 3. We're going to read the first 22 verses. All right, and so I'm using the Christian Standard Bible, so follow along whatever Bible you have. And it says, "Meanwhile, Moses was shepherding the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire within a bush. As Moses looked, he saw that the bush was on fire but was not consumed. So Moses thought, I must go over and look at this remarkable sight. Why isn't this bush burning up? When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called out to him from the bush, Moses, Moses. Here I am, Moses answered. Do not come closer, he said. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. And then he continued, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people in Egypt, and have heard them crying out because of their oppressors. I know about their sufferings, and I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians, and to bring them from that land to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the territory of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. So because the Israelites' cry for help has come to me, and I have also seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them, therefore go. I am sending you to Pharaoh so that you may lead my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses asked God, Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He answered, I will certainly be with you, and this will be a sign to you that I am the one who sent you. When you bring the people out of Egypt, you will all worship God at this mountain. Then Moses asked God, If I go to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? What should I tell them? And God replied to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you were to say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, Say this to the Israelites, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me to you. And this is my name forever. This is how I am to be remembered in every generation. Go and assemble the leaders of Israel and say to them, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me and said, I have paid close attention to you and to what has been done to you in Egypt, and I have promised you that I will bring you up from the misery of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. They will listen to what you say. Then you, along with the elders of Israel, must go to the king of Egypt and say to him, The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Now please let us go on a 3-day trip into the wilderness, so that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. However, I know that the king of Egypt will not allow you to go, even under force from a strong hand. But when I stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all of my miracles that I will perform in it, after that he will let you go. And I will give these people such favor with the Egyptians that when you go, you will not leave empty-handed. Each woman will ask her neighbor and any woman staying in her house for silver and gold jewelry and clothing, and you will put them on your sons and daughters, and so you will plunder the Egyptians. Wow. All right, 22 verses. All right, and so there's a lot to unpack there. But a big thing is, all right, so let's talk about God's name. So if you look in your Bible, or however you're reading it, if you notice that the word Lord is capitalized, if you've ever wondered about that, well, let me solve that mystery for you. It's capitalized because it's a literal translation of the Hebrew word that's spelled YHWH. Now, normally, we fill in the vowels and we call it Yahweh. So if you've ever heard Yahweh, that's where it comes from. Some people will put different vowels in there, but the idea is we don't have a perfect understanding of how the Hebrews would have said it, because they didn't use vowels when they were writing down language back then. It just wasn't a thing. All right, so we call him Yahweh, right? And that is the Lord's literal name. Now, the Hebrews would not say Yahweh. They had a different name that they used for God because they felt like Yahweh was such a holy title, they were not fit to say it. And so, there you go. The more you know. All right, and so, but we see that through this title, what they're saying is that God is holy. God is eternal. He's always existed. I am who I am. I was not created. I've always been here. He's the only one who can say that. He is outside of creation. He is outside of time and space. There is nothing to compare him to because he is the all-powerful, the one and only I am who I am. That is God. And so how is God holy? If we can describe holy as being set apart, all right, and God is set apart, right? And so we would call that his ontological holiness. And all that means is that there's nothing like him. He's set apart in a physical manner. He is a unique being all unto himself. He is ontologically holy. And then he is also ethically holy, right? He is the originator of morality, of right and wrong. He's the author and creator, and so he gets to tell us what is good and what is bad. He is ethically holy. And then he's also devotionally holy, in which he is the author and creator, and he created everything. And so that means everything that exists is about him. It's about glorifying him. Ultimately, it has to bring him glory, and if it does not, then it's sin. So he is devotionally holy. So let me recap that for you. He is ontologically holy, he is ethically holy, and he is devotionally holy. And I know those are big words or some weird definitions, but those are three aspects of God we should be remembering when we're talking about him and reading about him and worshiping him, because there's no other being like him, and he is worthy of our worship, and we ought to recognize his holiness in that way. And so Moses, he's going after this sheep, and he finds this burning bush, and he realizes that God is in the bush. God is talking to him, and God tells him, take off your sandals, for what you're standing on holy ground. Now, was there something special about this ground that made it holy? No. What made it holy was the fact that God was there. So if God was somewhere else and Moses was there, then God would have said the same thing. God said, if you're around me, you need to give me reverence. This is holy ground. I require you to take off your shoes. He's God. He gets to call the shots. He gets to make the rules, right? He's holy in that way. And so here's where things get a little weird if you really start thinking about it, because Moses comes up with all of these objections. In fact, he comes up with 5 objections for why he can't do what God wants him to do. And so In chapter 3, verses 11 and 12, he says, God, I'm not important enough. You're talking to the creator of the universe, the one that made you. God, I'm not important enough. The second word, God, I don't have the words. That's in verses 13 and 18. And then in chapter 4, we haven't read that. You should go and read that yourself. Verses 1 through 9, he says, they're not going to listen to me. Again, you're talking to the creator of the universe, right? All-powerful, all-knowing. Yeah, anyway. Moses, I guess, as educated as he was, wasn't super bright when it comes to dealing with God. But, maybe we would have done the same thing. And in chapter 4, verses 10 through 12, he says, but God, I'm not a good speaker. In fact, he says, my speech is sluggish. Some people will actually say that he probably had a speech impediment. Maybe he had a stutter. We don't know for sure. Maybe he just had stage fright. But the point is, he's saying, God, it's not that they won't listen to me. I'm not going to be able to speak it. Right? There's something wrong with me. And then he says something that really, really ticks God off. And it says in verses 13 through 17 in chapter 4. And he says, God, just send someone else. If you want to do anything that's going to make God angry, tell him that. The author, creator of the universe, in fact, he had a very large role in creating who you are and giving you purpose and meaning in life. You have a specific role and job that he's built you to do, and then you go and tell him, I can't do it, send someone else. Yeah, he's not going to be super happy with you. Okay, and we see that in this passage here. All right, and so, but every single time, because God is patient, right? God is kind. Even when he gets angry with us, he keeps reassuring Moses, you're not in control. And that's actually a comfort, right? If you know that you are not in control and God is in control and God's asking you to do something, that means you're not responsible for the results. You're just responsible for doing the job the best that you can, and he is responsible for the results. And so God just keeps reassuring Moses, just do it. I'll handle the details. You just be obedient in this right now for me. All right, and so Moses did not trust God at all. He felt totally inadequate to do the job. And you can tell, like, he knows more about God than he did before. He recognizes now that this is the God of the Hebrews, obviously, the God of his family, even though he did not grow up later in life with the Israelites, right? He was raised in the palace of the Egyptians. But he has now spent 40 years with Jethro and their clan, and who worshipped God, the same God, Yahweh. They were descendant from Abraham also. They came from the line of Abraham and Keturah, who was Abraham's next wife after Sarah. They had lots of kids, right? Just go back and read that in Genesis, all right? And so Moses didn't trust God. And, when you really think about it, looking at our life, I know I can look at my life, I am incapable of a lot without God. I mean, there's a lot that I can try to do. I could accomplish things, yes. But the big stuff, most people don't realize how much they're missing out on because they're not siding with God. They're not listening to what God has to say. They're not living their life with the purpose that God is trying to give them. And so they're only living life like at a quarter of a tank. We are incapable of a lot, but as soon as we start following God's will and purpose for our life, in the small things first, and then into the big things, right? Being obedient with the small things, God will reveal the bigger things to us. We find out there's so much more to life than we could have ever imagined, all right? And so then we'll keep reading. We're going to pick it up in Exodus chapter 4, verses 18 and 20. And it says, Then Moses, so after God has talked to Moses, he went back to his father-in-law Jethro and said to him, Please let me return to my relatives in Egypt and see if they are still living. Okay, so at this point, God has shown Moses the different miracles that he wants Moses to perform in front of the Israelites. Moses agrees. God says, if you really are nervous about talking, I'll send your brother Aaron to you. And so he hasn't seen his brother Aaron in 40 years at least. Okay, but he says, Aaron's going to help you. If that's what you require, we need to do this. If you're going to be obedient and you need help, here you go. So again, God's merciful, kind, gracious, right? Even if he's a little angry at Moses for being reluctant. Okay, and so, and he goes to Jethro and says, I need to go back to Egypt. I need to help my relatives. And so Jethro says, go in peace. And now in Midian, the Lord told Moses, return to Egypt, for all the men who wanted to kill you are dead, which was basically the entire royal family of Egypt, because he killed that Egyptian taskmaster. Yeah, he was getting ahead of God. Remember that? All right. So, but I will, so when you go back to Egypt, make sure that you do before Pharaoh all of the wonders that I have put within your power, but I will harden his heart so that he won't let the people go. And you will say to Pharaoh, this is what the Lord says, Israel is my firstborn son. I told you, let my son go so that he may worship me, but you refused to let him go. Look, I'm about to kill your firstborn son. All right, and so this is a precursor of things to come. And if you know the story, you know that's actually what ends up happening. But God gives Pharaoh chance after chance after chance after chance to get it right. But Pharaoh doesn't agree. He doesn't listen. And God supernaturally does not intervene to make him listen. Right? And so it's sad, but that's what's coming, and that's what was required for the Israelites to be free. Okay, and then we'll pick it up again in verse 27 of chapter 4. And it says, now the Lord had said to Aaron, so while God is talking to Moses, he's also talking to Aaron. All right, and he says, go and meet Moses in the wilderness. Now, I have a brother. I love my brother very much. But if I had not seen him in more than 40 years, and then a voice starts telling me, you need to go visit your brother in the forest, that'd be weird. Okay, well, if I knew it was God, I would obey, right? But maybe I would be a little reluctant to. But Aaron is not, fortunately, okay? And so Aaron went and met Moses at the mountain of God and kissed him, and Moses told Aaron everything the Lord had sent him to say, and about all the signs he had commanded him to do. Then Moses and Aaron went and assembled all the elders of the Israelites. Aaron repeated everything the Lord had said to Moses and performed the signs before the people. The people believed, and when they heard that the Lord had paid attention to them and that he had seen their misery, they knelt low and worshipped. You know, there had to have been a lot of committed believers during this point in time. For 430 years, despite being slaves in a terrible situation where they suffered a lot, they were still worshiping God. They were still praying. They were still singing to God. Now, I don't know how many committed believers there were. I don't know what it looked like, but as soon as they realized that God was working behind the scenes on their behalf and that he was coming to rescue them finally, what was their reaction? Not anger. They got on their knees and they worshiped. There you go. That's faith. That's awesome. And so Moses finally gets to reunite with his family after 40 years. And so this is the first time in the Bible that we really see God sending a prophet. And God was not worried about Moses' shortcomings, and he had a lot of them. I'm not saying that Moses' objections weren't legitimate. They were. If you have a stutter and God calls you to be a speaker, you might be a little worried. And it's going to test your trust and faith in God. But he's going to make it possible. He's going to make a way, right? Because it's about what he can do through you. It's not about what you can do by yourself, right? Because he's the one that's got the power and the guidance and the will and the know-how. He just needs you to be obedient, right? And so God's promise to his people is about to be fulfilled. So when we look at the story, it's important for us to think, are you doing things in your life on your own, or are you depending on God's plan and purpose in your life, knowing that He is the one ultimately in control? That's huge. And that's something that most people, maybe it'll take their entire lives to figure out what that looks like. How to live life in a way that you're letting God be the one in control and you're just being obedient in the meantime, right? Romans 12 tells us to be patient in affliction. But that's also being patient when you're not being afflicted and when things are normal. And it's just trusting that God has you in His hands from moment to moment, day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year. And maybe your life doesn't look like you wished it would have. Maybe things have happened to you that you have hated, you have not enjoyed, you have not understood. I'm sure for the Israelites who lived in slavery for 400 years and who were born and died during that time, they did not like it. And understand, though, that God let it happen. And God did not forget about them. God didn't turn His hearing aid off, right? He heard them that whole time. He knew they were in misery. But His timing is perfect, and it looks way different than timing that we might choose and think is good. And it takes more trust and faith, a lot of the times, and more trust and faith than what we currently have. But that's okay, right? Because we see in the Bible, we're not the only ones who've ever struggled with that. It's a theme. Very few in the Bible got it right. And we just finished talking about Joseph a few weeks ago, who went through 13 years of affliction. And he, according to the story, he never gave up. He never questioned. His faith and trust were unshakable. Moses, who arguably ends up having a bigger role in the history of the Israelites, yeah, he questioned God a good bit, right? And even as he goes along, he doesn't always get it right. But we can still learn from his example, and we can do better, right? Trusting that God is in control, and all we have to do is be obedient in the meantime. All right, so a couple things to think about as I let you go today. Think about how you can encourage other believers to accomplish the task that God gives us, and trusting Him for the results and just being obedient in the meantime. How to encourage other people. All right, that's my challenge to you this week. Be encouraging, be loving, and I'll see you later. Praying for you. Don't forget, like, subscribe if you want notifications every time I release a video. Just ring that bell, and I'll see you next week. All right, bye.